Desire for retribution. Austria-Hungary's desire for retribution following the assassination of Archduke Franz Ferdinand was a pivotal factor in its approach to World War I. The assassination, carried out by Gavrilo Princip, a Bosnian Serb nationalist, was perceived not just as a political act, but as an affront to the dignity and stability of the Austro-Hungarian Empire. The ruling elite, particularly within the military and political spheres, felt a deep-seated need to respond decisively to restore national pride and deter further acts of aggression from Serbia and other nationalist movements within the empire. This desire for vengeance was not merely about punishing Serbia. It was about affirming Austria-Hungary's authority in the Balkans and demonstrating its strength to its own diverse population, which included various ethnic groups. The leadership believed that a swift military victory would quell internal dissent and solidify their grip on power. Consequently, this retributive mindset overshadowed any potential consideration for diplomatic resolutions, leading to an escalation of hostilities rather than a push for peace. The pursuit of vengeance became a guiding principle that directed military strategies and political rhetoric, further entrenching the empire in a conflict that would ultimately spiral beyond their control. Entangling alliances. The complex system of alliances in early 20th century Europe significantly influenced Austria-Hungary's decision-making during World War I. The empire had a strong alliance with Germany, known as the Triple Alliance, which included Italy. This alliance created a sense of mutual obligation. Austria-Hungary felt compelled to act against Serbia, not only for its own interests, but also to uphold its commitments to Germany. The German leadership, under Kaiser Wilhelm II, provided assurances of support, encouraging Austria-Hungary to take a hardline approach against Serbia. The entanglement of alliances meant that any move toward peace would be viewed as a betrayal of its ally, potentially jeopardizing future support from Germany. This perception of loyalty and obligation inhibited diplomatic engagement and made the idea of negotiating peace appear weak or defeatist. The fear of isolating themselves and leaving Germany vulnerable to further challenges from Russia or France added another layer of complexity. Austria-Hungary's leadership was thus caught in a web of obligations that emphasized war as a means to uphold alliances, leaving little room for peace initiatives. Nationalism. Nationalism played a critical role in shaping Austria-Hungary's war strategy and its reluctance to seek peace. The empire was a patchwork of diverse ethnic groups, each with its own national aspirations. Following the assassination of Franz Ferdinand, nationalist fervor surged, particularly among the Slavic populations, who looked to Serbia for inspiration and support in their quest for autonomy. The ruling elite feared that a premature peace could embolden these nationalist movements, leading to further disintegration of the empire. Instead of fostering unity, the war was seen as a way to assert dominance over these groups and reaffirm the empire's power. The belief that military success would curb nationalist sentiments further fueled a resolve to continue fighting. Moreover, the leadership often conflated national pride with military victory, viewing the war as a means to solidify their own legitimacy and authority. As the conflict dragged on, the need to suppress nationalist uprisings and maintain control over various territories became increasingly intertwined with the decision to avoid peace negotiations. This dynamic reinforced the perception that continued warfare was necessary to safeguard the empire's integrity. Military strategies. The initial military strategies employed by Austria-Hungary were premised on the expectation of a quick and decisive victory. Following the outbreak of war, military planners believed that a swift campaign against Serbia would crush resistance and restore order. The guns of August mentality dominated, with an emphasis on rapid mobilization and offensive operations. Leaders believed that by striking hard and fast, they could achieve their goals before other powers intervened. This mindset left little room for diplomatic solutions. The focus was squarely on military triumph rather than negotiations. As the war progressed and the realities of trench warfare set in, these strategies proved inadequate, leading to significant losses and a protracted conflict. The failure to achieve quick victories in Serbia and the subsequent involvement of other powers complicated the situation further. Despite the changing dynamics on the battlefield, military leaders remained resistant to the idea of peace negotiations, viewing them as a sign of weakness. The initial belief in the efficacy of military strategy constrained political discourse and fostered an environment where peace was seen as unattainable or undesirable. Perceived threats. Austria-Hungary viewed both Serbia and Russia as existential threats, which significantly influenced its decision to prolong the war rather than pursue peace. The assassination of Archduke Franz Ferdinand heightened fears of a Serbian-led uprising within the empire, and many leaders believed that allowing Serbia to survive would embolden similar nationalist movements among other ethnic groups. Moreover, Russia's support for Serbia was seen as a direct challenge to Austro-Hungarian authority in the Balkans. The perception of being encircled by hostile powers created a sense of urgency to act militarily. Leaders believed that a strong military response was necessary to deter further aggression and protect the empire's territorial integrity. This view was reinforced by the belief that any peace settlement reached while Serbia remained intact would be seen as a victory for Serbia and a failure for Austria-Hungary. Consequently, the empire's leadership became increasingly entrenched in a mindset that equated peace with vulnerability, further solidifying their commitment to ongoing conflict. Misjudgment of duration. The misjudgment of the war's duration was a critical factor in Austria-Hungary's reluctance to pursue peace. At the outset of the conflict, many leaders believed that the war would be short-lived, perhaps lasting only a few months. This assumption was based on historical precedents and the prevailing notion of quick, decisive victories. The expectation of a rapid resolution led to a focus on military strategies rather than diplomatic negotiations. As the war dragged on and the scale of the conflict escalated, this initial miscalculation created a paradox. The longer the war continued, the more entrenched leaders became in their positions. They hoped that continued military efforts would eventually yield a favorable outcome, despite mounting casualties and resources. This misjudgment not only fueled a sense of optimism among military leaders, but also discouraged any serious consideration of peace talks. The belief that the situation would soon turn in their favor became a self-reinforcing narrative, ultimately prolonging the conflict and entrenching Austria-Hungary in a war that it could not win.
Influence of the military. The influence of the military on Austria-Hungary's decision-making processes during World War I was profound. Military leaders played a significant role in shaping political discourse, often advocating for a hardline approach against Serbia and discouraging any discussions of peace. This military dominance was rooted in a belief that military action would solve the empire's problems, not just on the battlefield but also in terms of internal stability. As casualties mounted and the war became protracted, the military's voice grew louder, framing any calls for peace as signs of weakness or defeatism. The lack of confidence in political leadership further entrenched this dynamic, as military leaders were seen as more capable of addressing the challenges posed by both the enemy and internal dissent. Consequently, military considerations overshadowed diplomatic efforts, and the leadership remained steadfast in their commitment to warfare. The military's influence created an environment where peace negotiations were not merely sidelined but actively resisted, as leaders believed that only through continued fighting could the empire hope to achieve its objectives. Internal pressures. Internal pressures within Austria-Hungary also contributed to the reluctance to seek peace during World War I. The empire was characterized by a diverse array of ethnic groups, each with its own aspirations and grievances. As the war progressed, these groups increasingly expressed their dissatisfaction with the central government, which struggled to maintain unity in the face of rising nationalism. The leadership feared that negotiating peace could lead to further fragmentation, as various ethnic groups might interpret a peace settlement as an opportunity to push for greater autonomy or independence. Additionally, political factions within the government exerted pressure on the leadership to continue the war, believing that military victories could strengthen the central authority and suppress dissent. The leadership was caught in a delicate balance. They needed to project strength to maintain control while also addressing the underlying tensions that the war had exacerbated. This internal complexity made it challenging to pursue peace, as leaders were wary of the potential consequences that any concession might bring. Changing war dynamics. As World War I progressed, the dynamics of the conflict shifted dramatically, complicating Austria-Hungary's ability to pursue peace. Initially, the empire had hoped for quick victories and a swift resolution. However, the entry of new players, such as the United States and the shifting allegiances of existing powers, altered the balance of power on the battlefield. The emergence of trench warfare created a stalemate that neither side could easily break, leading to a prolonged and grueling conflict. As the war dragged on, the leaders of Austria-Hungary clung to the hope that circumstances would change in their favor, fostering a belief that military efforts could still yield favorable results. This belief was often supported by the military, which maintained that continued fighting was the only path to victory. The changing dynamics, including economic strains and growing anti-war sentiments among the population, created an increasingly volatile situation. Despite these pressures, the leadership remained reluctant to initiate peace negotiations, believing that any concession would undermine their standing and leave them vulnerable to further challenges from both external enemies and internal nationalist movements.